In this episode, we're going to talk about becoming a sports family, why Grace does video preaching, understanding your local predicament and how that affects your church's mission, and what happened this week with our ongoing piloting journey. Hello, Derek.
Hi, Danielle.
Hi.
How are you this week?
I'm fine.
Are you?
Yep. I don't know if we can start every one of these with you going, are you really okay? No, I'm not okay. No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Listen, all of our staff's talking about how cheery you are on these podcasts.
It's easy to be cheery behind a microphone, I guess. I don't know. I'm not, I guess, yeah, I understand. I don't present as cheery. That's all I have to say. I don't
I
mean
wondered
to,
what the second part of that sentence was.
I was going to say I'll get better, but I'm not going to. But I'm not, yeah.
I refuse.
I don't know. I don't like to come off as intimidating, but I think that is what happens. It's not my heart. I generally am insecure. Aren't we supposed to be getting to know you? No. Anyway, I'm working. I am actually
I like
working
how this
on
is
it.
going.
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
So, well, actually.
This is actually for you.
I know. I forgot.
Because,
Yeah.
I'll do a little bit of self-revelation because I did grow up in a sports family, very much. So both my parents were high school teachers and coaches. Yeah. So my dad was a football coach, track coach. My mom was a cross-country coach, a variety of other coaches. We were very sportsy. All my brothers and sisters played sports. I was a football player, track, threw the javelin, did all that. My kids were kind of sportsy kids. We had a daughter, water polo, and two pole vaulters, very good pole vaulters, both my boys. And so you and I have known each other for a long time, and that's always been my kind of personal history. And it's been fun and funny to watch you go through a little personal journey from what I would call an artsy background. I'm not saying your family was artsy, but like you and Dave, like you're married, like you're both very artistic, incredibly gifted artists in your own right. Yeah. And all of a sudden Dax comes along and you've got some sportsy stuff going on. And now I'm watching like Instagram posts about races and rivals. Oh, gosh. And I'm just curious about that journey. How has the transition gone from artsy to sportsy?
Yeah, it's been interesting. And my mind right now as you're talking is kind of flashing back to like different times where, people are like, draw with your children. And I'm like, oh. And I had all this stuff, like when we went through the adoption journey, you kind of like make a book kind of a thing. And it was like, I had all these like dreams of like, creative household and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Blah. And I did those things. Right. I created an environment where creativity is celebrated, all the things,
How'd it turn out?
It turns out like this. Dax, do you want to learn how to draw a dragon? No. And he's not rude. He's just like, no, I don't want to learn how to draw a dragon.
No desire.
And he'll come, and he does a little bit, but like he's not lit up by it at all. So I'm like drawing these huge things, cutting them out, making dioramas, and he's like.
So what is he lit up by?
Running.
Which is, I'm assuming was Dave in your specialty at some point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I mean, okay, I grew up kind of half and half.
Right.
I did grow up
you
like
played
I played basketball until like 9th grade.
Right.
Had a catastrophic injury.
Right.
But I don't think it would have kept going anyway because I definitely leaned toward like art. Much more theatrical, like singing all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I don't even know how to articulate what we're learning. I guess the thing is, I don't know how to fully engage in it yet because I'm worrying.
You're not a sports mom yet. You're not like a.
No. Someone's talked to me about some sort of special chair. And I'm like, what? Okay. But the thing is, here's what I know. Soccer. No, not for me. I mean, if
he's good at it though, right?
He's good at it, but he's good at soccer. He's amazing at running, cross country. Yeah. No, it's different. He was great at martial arts. Like everything he tries physically, ninja gym.
Yeah, he's just a natural.
He's just physical.
Yep.
Yeah. He's just, his body just, I mean, you've seen him. He just doesn't stop moving. Yeah. And he's not hyper. He can sit and read. He can do, he just is physical.
So one of my favorite things, because we had this with my oldest son, Caleb, when he was a pole vaulter, he had a rival.
Oh, yeah.
There was a kid from another school who, in fact, Caleb was Caleb was really good. Like he was nationally ranked from the time he was a kid at the pole vault. But there was this one kid his junior year that when they would go to these big tournaments, the kid wasn't from around here, but when they go, the kid beat him every time. And every meet through the whole season, they met again at the state championships, and Caleb won the state championship, beat him on his final jump. And so it was like this most satisfying, because it's like there's this like, you know, and as parents, it's hard not to get involved in the rivalries. So Dax has White Band.
White Band. He calls it, I promise you, we did not help with this nickname.
Which is my favorite.
He calls him White Band. Because he wears like a white sweatband to all the races.
And that's what he sees on his head as he's running.
As he's like running behind him. Yeah, White Band.
So I find myself secretly at night cheering for Dax to beat White Band one of these days. Like I'm way in.
Yeah, I would love it.
I'm way in on it.
Yeah.
So
I had, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm done.
I had a first, I think, parenting/coaching miss. We do not do this I promise you. And maybe this is just hard for me to believe because I have not been around athletes in this way, but he asks us, do you have the video? Can I see the video? Like what he's 6 and he's asking us these questions. So Dave's at one end, I'm at the other end. And so the other day there was a race, White Band, per usual, comes through. He comes around the corner first, and I'm like, and I see Dax, and he's close enough that I don't know how much he has in the tank.
Right.
I'm going to be tired by the time I walk to the finish, so I don't know. So I try not to be like, go faster, blah, blah,
right.
So I have the camera, and I know White Band's name because I found out that White Band is related to somebody who follows me on Instagram on accident. So I'm like,
I wonder if they listen to this podcast.
Well, probably not. No, we'll see. Hey, they know I'm sending them videos. So like, oh, this is my nephew. Can you send me the video? I'm like, yep. Tell him to watch out for Dax. But so anyway, I'm filming it, and the thing about cross country that I've found interesting is it's very encouraging.
Right.
Because really, it's like the kids beating themselves.
Yeah.
And so
it's just so brutal by itself. It's so brutal.
Yeah. And so all the parents are just like, any kid that's across the finish line is like, oh, yes, you can do it.
Right.
So I've learned that. That's just what you do. So I've got my phone in my hand. The kid runs by. I say, let's go. His name, okay. Blah, blah. Dax comes, obviously, way more intense. So he gets back. Later on, he's asking, oh, do you guys hear the video? Can we watch the video? Yeah, sure. We put the video on our TV, and he hears me go, come on, name. And he whips his head over, and he looks at me, and he goes, why did you cheer on name? And I was, oh, no, he said, why did you cheer on White Band? I'm sorry, he did. Sorry, I ruined the story. He said, why did you cheer on White Band? And I said, I don't know. I just felt like everyone was yelling. I'm like, obviously, I want you to do your best, but I think it was like my first kind of like, ooh. But yeah, he is, anyway, this is getting way long, but he is supremely just competitive. Yeah. And one thing I've learned about Dax is he kind of came pre-wired for shame. I know this sounds bad, but there's just something in him. I prayed against it from the beginning. Like he just has this, you will never have to he's just wired for it. So my journey has been not only just a sports thing, but just figuring out how do you frame coming in second through 100th, when he just wants it so bad. And I think he'll get it. I think he's going to actually, I know people say, oh, he's 6 or whatever, but Aaron's son, who we're going to have on in a minute here, he was doing a life story where he was talking about at 6 years old, he got a camera and he's at video school as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, Caleb didn't, your son didn't go to the Olympics, but he went to college on doing this and was amazing. Yeah. And so part of me, I don't want to put pressure on him, but I want to foster it. And so I don't know.
I love that. I just love watching your journey to a sportsy mom.
We'll see what happens. If I start wearing the shirts and stuff, you'll be
it's going to happen.
Yeah, I did.
And I'll give you a sentence that we learned early on for when the kids didn't win.
Oh yeah, good.
Because it's hard for a parent to know what to say.
It is.
You don't know what to say because you want to encourage them. You don't want to be a jerk to the other kid.
Correct.
And be like, you'll do it next time.
Beat him into the ground.
Yeah. There's no. So the phrase that we learned was, we love to watch you compete.
Oh, that's good.
We love one of my favorite things in the world. Say
Oh,
the
that's
deck. One of
great.
my favorite things in the world is to watch you run.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And
that's
it
good.
just that's encouragement. It's all about them and
that's
their performance. Has nothing to do with where they finished or where they placed or
That's
whatever.
cool.
They just need to know you love to watch them do that thing. And
That's awesome.
That was a good thing we learned along the way.
Hot tip.
Look at this.
Listen, I'm not even saying this just because you're sitting here, and I just told you this the other day too. I think you and Kim, you've given me the best parenting advice anybody's ever given me, and you gave it to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just watching you and listening to you. And like, there are still things that, this will be one of them. There are still things that Dax will do something, and I literally will hear your wife's voice in my head.
Yes.
Don't make him afraid.
Right.
Don't make him afraid. He's not fragile. He's not, like.
My wife is very passionate about kids being brave.
Yeah. She should do like a TED Talk.
Right.
Anyway, enough about me. Never doing that again.
Hey, that was great.
All
right. We better move on.
Back to you. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to your inbox. And we're hoping we're taking themes from emails that Derek has gotten either recently or over the years. And we're hoping like if we can kind of bring these topics to light and give you some framework that it'll help you if you have these questions and you want a different perspective. So we'll put it in the show notes. You can copy it, do whatever you want, use the resources. But yeah, so this one, we get a ton. And I'm assuming people are going to get it more and more as we move, just as the world changes. And probably since COVID, a bunch of you have gotten this. Why does Grace do video preaching? Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different angles, and really I want to hit on a couple of different questions that kind of revolve around this, and then also I'll respond with a couple of different reasons why we've landed on why we do this. And I just want to acknowledge up front, like, I don't have any concept that this will be a forever and always thing. I don't think it's like set in stone that we will always do this. We decided when we went multi-site to do video preaching, we thought it was best for a number of reasons, which I'll get into. But I also know that people, including pastors, have very strong feelings about this, of just like, either our church will never do that, or our church does that and we'll never apologize for it, and all that kind of stuff. And this is just one of those, to me, a kind of a gray area that, there's a practical nature to it. I don't think it's unspiritual or sinful in any way. So I think it's one of those, choose what's best for you. But I don't want people to get the impression that I'm like pounding the table for video preaching. This is just kind of our journey through it and how we've answered questions along the way. So one of the questions that always comes is, isn't video impersonal? Isn't that an impersonal way to do the sermon? And the truthful answer is yes, it is. And what we've said in response to that, that's why every other aspect of the service must be incredibly personal.
Yep.
And so the ushers have to be fantastic, and the greeters have to be fantastic, and the site pastor and the worship leaders, and the truth is that video sermon is just one small element to what that whole service is. And so I know one of the things that you've talked about before and that we believe in is that just the way we record our videos is a little bit different than what normal churches do that do this, but we record in the studio to the camera. So it's not a camera watching me in another room talking to other people, and that room is just listening in. It's my chance to look straight into the camera and kind of speak to that congregation. So it is impersonal, and I think one kind of biblical illustration is, Paul used these circular letters when he was communicating with his churches. That was the technology he had at the time when he couldn't be 2 places at once or 15 places at once, and he would send these letters, and they're called circular letters because they would circulate from church to church in a particular region. He wrote it to that whole region, and it would circulate. And I always think of it as funny, with when people kind of dig their heels in over this, of just going, can you imagine, some people in that church going, I'm not listening to that letter unless Paul is here in person. It doesn't carry the same weight or whatever. It's like, no, you use the technology that you have at the time to
he'll
multiply.
be here in 2 years, so we'll see you then.
Yeah.
Poor
Okay.
Paul.
Yeah.
He did the best with
He
what
did
he had.
with what he had. Man, that dude ran himself ragged.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what he would have done with video technology.
Oh, no. I can't imagine.
It's crazy.
Or
to
the
think.
printing press.
Right.
I mean,
Just something
honestly,
that simple.
yeah.
All right. So the second question that often circles around this is why would I come watch a screen when I could watch church on my computer or on my TV from my couch? It removes all motivation for a person to engage with the church. And so my response around this is just usually around, that question represents a grossly underdeveloped view of the church, this aspect of theology called ecclesiology. It's an underdeveloped ecclesiology, so that if somebody thinks that the sum total, the sole purpose of going to a church is listening to a 30-minute sermon, man, that says more about our view of church than it does how that sermon is being delivered. And so, we try to set the bar much higher than that in terms of what it means to engage with a church. And so, you can't experience deep community from your couch. Mm-hmm. You can't use your spiritual gifts from your couch. You can't serve the poor from your couch. There's a whole bunch of things you can't do from your couch. And so, and those are the very things that's what the church is. Yeah. And so, I think really the response there is, man, there is more to church than a 30-minute sermon.
That's good.
The last question is about, some people will often say, when you're preaching from a centralized location and there are a variety of congregations listening to that, you can never address the personal needs of a congregation through a centralized message like that. And, so our response to this typically is, that those site pastors and those leaders in that congregation will always maintain the right to be a prophetic voice to that congregation.
Absolutely.
If there's something going on in their congregation, they have the freedom to address that thing in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
But I come back to 1 Corinthians 10:13 as a really interesting passage for this that says, "No temptation has seized you except what is common to man." And I love that passage because it talks about kind of the commonality of our experience that, I've preached in a variety of different countries. I've preached in Thailand, I've preached in Haiti, I've preached in Japan, I've preached all over the place. And it's like, I can use the same message all over the world because there is a common experience of humanity that the Word of God speaks to. And if it needs to be any more specific than that, there's other ways that we can speak into that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good.
Yeah. So those are kind of three of the questions that, isn't it impersonal? Why would I come if I can watch it from my couch? And then you can't address specific needs. But then I come back to just some of the benefits of video preaching. Again, I want to make sure people understand I'm not lobbying for this. I'm just saying this is what we've learned. We've learned and worked through as we've done this. So the number one reason that we use it we have 3 different congregations, is for unity. We believe that there should be a unified preaching voice. It's one of the best predictors of unity in the church. Yep. And so we just think really nothing else will hold us together, kind of like the unified proclamation of God's word. And so we're in the same series at all the time, studying the same scripture, having the same conversations around the same truths from the Word of God. So the unity is a big thing. Yeah. The second one, and this is really important. I just had a conversation a couple weeks ago after service. Somebody was saying, it's how did they frame it? It's time to free your other pastors to preach, and it sounded very spiritual and compelling in the moment, but what I explained was it's really not a matter of freeing or not freeing anyone to preach. It's a matter of really the best use of our pastors' time and energies, and that if we have 3 congregations and we have 3 different pastors preparing 3 different sermons, or even if they're preparing the same sermon, for me, sermon preparation is usually about 15 to 20 hours per week. And so if we have...
And that's doing it all the time.
All the time.
So that's
after
low.
30 years of, doing this. Yeah. And if we multiply that times 3, we have a great inefficiency. I like to say, I would rather shoulder the burden of preaching most of the times and doing that time on my schedule and freeing our pastors, not to preach, but freeing our pastors to pastor their congregations, that their time could be much better spent pastoring the congregation. With those 15 or 20 hours a week, they can be leading and pastoring that congregation without the burden of having to preach every week. And
and you can, I don't want to
that's right.
overstate it, but like you can even see we have a preaching team and the site pastors are on it and they like to preach. Like, it's not they don't like to preach, but you can feel like on the months where we're like, okay, who's taking this? Can people take this week or that week and blah, blah, blah. There's kind of a lean back from the table. Like, everyone's happy to do it,
right?
But they've come to just, I think, appreciate being able to be the kind of pastor God called them to be in particular. So yeah, it's a cool thing that we get to do.
That's good. Yeah, and often, you know, if I'm in the room and Mike, our pastor in Harbor Creek, is from the room, and walk into Harbor Creek, and I would say, "Who's your pastor?" They would say Mike.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm the talking head, but you know, he's their pastor,
totally.
and as it should be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So we're not.
It's great.
We're not pastoring from a distance.
Right.
It's just that teaching gift that's coming from a central location.
And I do think that's sometimes the reason people are against video preaching is because they assume you're pastoring from the screen.
Right. That's right.
And that's just not possible.
Yeah. The last one is maybe the least important, but the most practical, and that is that when we're all in the same series and listening to the same preaching, we can have the same supporting resources.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a cool thing. It gives our church to kind of gather across even campuses or congregations, and know that if they're in a life group here, a life group there, you know, there can be a joint collaborative life group or whatever, that they're going to be going through the same materials at the same time. And so I think that's, that's just one of those cool things that allows a bigger group of people to kind of be, and I just think about, we're talking today a little bit about engaging the community.
Yeah.
Thinking about that community conversation that can happen because we're all kind of studying the same thing. I think there's a power to that.
Yeah, that's cool. Also, just this is my own random thought, but our youth ministry leverages it also.
That's right.
And so now they have a team that's contextualizing, and they can do that because of this structure, which is really cool too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ironically, I'm going to train the youth ministry preaching team
nice.
Tonight.
They're so cool. That'll be awesome. I want to hear how that goes. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. Okay. So you guys can submit an email topic at dereksanford.com, and we can say your name, keep it anonymous, whatever you prefer, but we'd love to help tackle some of these topics if we can. So we're going to move on, and we're going to invite Aaron to join us next. So the meat of this podcast is where we pull back the curtain and show you what it looks like for us to move from an assimilation-driven megachurch model to a fusion model that includes and leverages discipleship multiplication model. And we're hoping that this is helpful for you and for us. And today we're going to be talking about understanding your church's local predicament. And we have Aaron Lundberg joining us.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Good afternoon.
Boy, this is like a...
Aaron, it's timeless.
I'd like to
Podcasts are
apologize.
timeless.
So good after whatever to whatever
be
time you're listening.
evergreen.
This one's going to be rough, everyone. Buckle up. Not because of Aaron, just because of our relationship together.
Right.
So Aaron, it's fine. Just go with it. Aaron is a dad to 4 kids. You have 2 officially out of the house now, husband to Kelly. And Aaron has been really part of this ministry since Derek, before birth. Yeah, he likes to say he was like born on the altar of the church,
Which is
super disturbing.
Yeah.
But when Derek became youth pastor, that's when you guys met, obviously. And you've been around since then. You've done everything youth ministry, college ministry, building and grounds, and kind of been Derek's right hand through it all. So, and now you're here on this podcast.
So that means I've made it.
I guess so.
I mean...
Thanks for joining us.
The 27 people listening.
Yeah.
Are
By the way,
really
subscribe,
impressed.
people.
Yeah, subscribe. There's lots of people listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you love what you hear, like and subscribe and share it with your friends.
Thank you. Oh, end of segment. Thank you, Aaron. All right. So we want to talk about local predicament. What is local predicament, Derek? Why do we want to talk about this?
All right. So, one of the things that has been kind of a standard part of this whole process for us is this idea, I think I talked about in the very first episode, that you can define discipleship locally. Certainly there are broad concepts around what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, but this idea that we could actually get specific about what does a disciple look like here and now and for this area. Mm-hmm. And so I know the first part of the process for us with Clarity House was, we had a team that was walking through this together to define what they called our local predicament. And so which just means what are the unique needs and opportunities right here where God has placed us. And for those listening, we're in a town called Erie, Pennsylvania.
No, it is not next to Philadelphia.
No, it's a long way away.
Is that not what you hear?
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Every time I'm like, we're in South Carolina. Oh, by Philly. No.
Nope.
Oh, do you go to New York City often? No. That is very far from me.
Yeah, we're like 8 hours from. It's an 8-hour drive or so to Philly.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, we're on the opposite side of the state, way up north. Really in the little. If people can picture Pennsylvania as a big rectangle, we're way up in the top left corner, right on Lake Erie, and it's an interesting place. We're part of probably what would be considered the Rust Belt, and. We came up with, as we went through the process with Clarity House, we came up with 3 descriptors that we said, and we can talk with Aaron about these, but that we are a community or region that's ironically insecure, that we are fractured, and that we are change resistant. And I'd like to go through those when we get Aaron on here. But we said really those 3 things are what kind of dominates this local predicament that we find ourselves in. And so as we thought about what do our disciples look like that we're trying to create at Grace, we wanted to create disciples that could address those predicaments. Right. We've framed it as, these are broken narratives. And so kind of our big concept over our discipleship process is to redeem narratives. We want disciples who will go out into the world and kind of redeem these broken narratives. So that's why we're talking about it. And Aaron, is not only has he been with us, with me from the kind of the beginning, but also has a deep commitment to the city and to the community that we live in, and that's expressed itself in a variety of ways. And so wanted him to talk a little bit about that as just kind of being embedded in the community and what has that looked like for him. And so anyway, but let's start with this local predicament stuff, and we can break it down.
Yeah. We want to start with, let's just start with the ironically insecure, how we came to that. Why don't you talk a little bit about just whatever comes to mind, your experience growing up, your experience just being in the community, whatever.
Well, I think ironically insecure is almost something that we kind of have forced upon ourselves in an effort to, we happened upon it in our desire to help speak about Erie positively.
Yeah, you're right.
And so it's almost like a backfire to where we're like, okay, well, you see the statements like it's okay to love Erie. It's all these different...
The mistake on the lake.
Mistake on the lake. And we're just like, oh, let's grab a hold of it and really try to own it with positivity. And I think by default, we started continue to further a narrative about ourselves that then bled into other areas of wow, I guess it's all right here.
Yeah. Well, and we would even do it, I think, around here, around church, oh yeah, it's good. Yeah, this is better than what you would see here or there. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, it's fine. It's good for Erie. That's a work on Erie. It's good. Everything is blah, blah, because Erie, yeah, it's fine. It's fine for Erie.
Yeah. And I think what struck us as we're kind of going through that process, just man, this is, the city really is fantastic.
Absolutely.
The resources here, we're on the lake, and it's such a beautiful spot, and, tourism dominates our summers, and there's lots of people who want to come here. And so, we said the fact that people in Erie are so insecure. Another thing I thought of that defines this insecurity is the brain drain. So it's the, assuming that kids are going to come up through high school, and our oldest, he went away to Duke. You think he's going to go out to Silicon Valley or whatever, and he comes back to Erie. Why? Because it's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. And so that's why we stuck that word ironic on the beginning, because there is an insecurity in the air, but it's ironic because there shouldn't be. We should be incredibly happy with where we live.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I was thinking about when we were first talking about the ironically insecure piece of this, I went to, okay, I've tried to hire a lot of people in my different roles, not only here, but in the business world, to come and work for Erie. And when you think about it, you start selling people on Erie, you actually sell them on everything that Erie is not. Well, in a way, you're like, well, we're this close to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo. So you're selling them on places other than Erie.
Yeah.
And all these different things that you start to say, and you're actually not, you're just furthering the narrative.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, there are the winters. So, the winters are great, but they're tough.
But you know what? The winter's never going to come blow in and take our house off the foundation.
It's true.
We don't have hurricane season.
Yeah, boy. Yeah.
We probably shouldn't talk about that because we don't know how it's going to be because we're filming. But yeah, we don't have, we have extreme weather, but we don't have to deal with what a lot of places deal with.
Devastating stuff, yeah.
Good. So we talked about how Erie is fractured. And that, I don't know where that started. I mean, we kind of started investigating it a little bit, but we can, I think, speak to that just even living in the city and the, neighborhoods and whatnot.
Well, I think I don't know if you want to talk historically about some of this stuff, but it's interesting because the one thing I've noticed in just as we've been choosing to raise our family in the city and different things, it's fractured within the city, but it's also fractured within a lot of people who live in the suburb and don't dare go to the city or talk a certain way about the city. And so it's almost like there's two fractures, the one within and the one on the outskirts looking in. And that was I didn't expect that. I thought, well, we're feeling called to the city and these different things that we wanted to be involved in. And so you already knew living in the city, all of the different fractures, but then you really started to feel the impact of how people view the people of the city or the city. Yeah. Not everyone, but there's a narrative out there. And then you start to kind of like, well, I got to figure out a way to defend that, or how do I help redeem that? And it's a fracture.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it when you really look at how deep this goes, I mean, I've heard it like, there's fracturing all over the place. Like, which hospital do you use?
Oh, yeah.
Is it Hammond or St. Vincent? And it's like, I'm a Hammond person. I'm a St. Vincent. Like, it's that goofy. Like, Erie's one of the only places I know of where like high school lines are still drawn way into adulthood. Like these rivalries between high schools. Are you a McDowell person? Are you a Prep person? Are you a Strong Vincent person, what it used to be, or, collegiate or whatever. And so there's that, but the territorialism really gets weird when we get into churches. Erie's one of the most social service rich communities in the country, literally per capita. Yeah. We have more social services. And I just had an incident even just last week talking with somebody who works with one of the agencies who does overlap work with other agencies who has I introduced two people, they had no idea each other's services existed.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, we should be talking and we should be building some bridges across these different services so that it's not so hard for people to navigate. But it is an Erie thing that there is this fracturing in our community.
And I think about too, like even historically as well, like my dad talks about growing up, like we still even have them, like you have like the kind of Little Italy, even still like the Polish neighborhood is still kind of there, like where my dad grew up, and like talking about the way they navigated their neighborhoods, and like your neighborhood had everything it needed, the church, the little corner store, the funeral home, whatever. And Erie just was built like that. It was kind of built on those segmented neighborhoods, and that just really stuck.
Yeah. Which all started out as really good and incredible things.
Exactly.
But then sin comes in and does its thing to fracture it and figures out a way to make it a really bad thing instead of celebrating all those different unique amazing things.
Yeah, and one of the outflows is, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Erie's named in USA Today as like the worst city in the country for African American people to live in and stuff. So that fracturing can take on a really dangerous, sad, reality when it's kind of played out into the really important. Right. It's goofy when we're talking about high schools.
Sure.
But when we're talking about now the fracturing between racial groups and ethnic groups, that it gets really sad really fast.
It does. Our third predicament. Wow, should we eat some sugar or something? This is so sad. I feel like we need to like carb load now.
We're building.
Okay.
We're building.
So change resistant is our third one. And this one's interesting to me. But go ahead. What were your takes on that?
Well, change resistant. I mean, as anything, is there's any attempt for something hopeful or it doesn't matter if it's construction of a certain road or a mural or whatever it is, it turns into something that's like, well, we can't do that, and here's all the reasons why. And we tend to steer clear as a city of, well, here's all the right reasons why, here's what it is going to look like in a positive standpoint. It's actually funny. So before I came here, I worked in a lot of restaurants and whatnot, and every restaurant corporation that I worked for would always test things out in Erie, and I've heard you talk about that. I mean, and the mantra was, even in a national corporation and a regional corporation, they would be like, well, if it works in Erie, it will work anywhere.
Wow.
And I've heard you say that about something, and
Procter and Gamble. We're a test market for Procter and Gamble. So yeah, Erie's a test market because of that very thing. Like if a product can catch on here, man, it'll work anywhere.
Yeah. And it could be anything simple like, oh, let's try this, basic steak meal. And if it, which would you think would work anywhere if it was a good steak. But if it didn't work in Erie, it doesn't work. Or something that's like, hey, let's put,
it's like not worth the risk
put
if it doesn't work.
paste on shrimp and sell that. And then it works in Erie. And we're like, hey, this is going to sell like hotcakes around the world.
Shrimp. Yeah. Hot shrimp. Yeah.
But you think about like the parts of the world. And again, part of it is, it's I've always used the word established. We're an established community. It feels kind of just set in its ways. This is the way it's always happened. And again, churches all around are filled with that kind of culture at times where it's like churches tend to be these little bastions of tradition, and so Erie kind of feels like that on steroids. And, you think about it just compared to, I know all of us have traveled a bit and, you go to Arizona or something, a new community in Arizona, and everything's new and everything just because nobody's from there and everybody's kind of come. And it's like, here's just the opposite. This is an old established, people are from here and don't mess with my, stuff. The other crazy thing, and I'll try to tell this real quick, but there's actually a historical instance where Erie had and some people take this further than others, but Erie had like a national curse put on it because of this change resistance. So it was called the War of the Gauges. And a railroad line was trying to be built from New York City to Chicago, and it ran through Erie. But the gauge or the width of the track was different in Pennsylvania than it was the rest of the country. And Erie didn't want to change the track. And they didn't want to change the width of the track to match this. And part of it was like the Teamsters Union. Like there's all kind of like backstories, because it had to be loaded on different trains and blah blah blah. And Horace Greeley, who you probably heard that name before, but he was a New York Herald columnist, wrote this curse in the New York Herald. He said, "Let Erie be avoided until grass grows in her streets." And so that it's one of those like the real prayer warriors always kind of pull this story out and say like, we need to pray over this curse in our community. But it all goes back to this kind of change resistance that it's slow to change. And so again, you said depressing. These are the three of the things that kind of are stuck in our community that are the broken narratives that we believe the church, that disciples of Jesus are called to redeem.
And I did say depressed, but the cool part about that process, which you guys could probably also speak to, is just that I think for all of us, especially those of us who grew up here, it kind of gave us this new fervor for realizing why we in particular are still here.
Correct.
And why Grace Church is in Erie.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, for me, like light bulbs started going off of just like, oh, that person can do this. That person can do this. Oh, that makes sense that person's here. Like it just, I don't know, it just gave me like a new hope.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was thinking when we went through this process, thinking back to a church planting class that I took way back when I was getting my master's degree. And I remember them talking about some different practices or exercises that pastors and church leaders could do to what they called exegete your community.
Oh, wow.
So often we talk about exegeting the Bible, bringing meaning out of the Bible. But they said almost before you can preach the Bible, you have to exegete the community. You have to find out what are the stories that you're dealing with right in front of you. And I'll never forget this one statement. They said most local McDonald's managers know the demographics of their community better than most pastors. And I thought that's a challenge. That's a challenge to the church.
Yeah, that's
like
good.
We don't just assume that we can just plop in and do our thing and everybody's going to come flocking. Like we have to understand what is the community, are the people that we've been called to deal with. So I know, we've mentioned this process with Clarity House a couple of times, but, I wondered if Aaron could reflect a little bit on some of the, we did a big brainstorm with a bunch of our team to kind of go through and really just to give other church leaders maybe an idea of what could an exercise like this look like as you think about specifically your community? What are the kind of details that might come to the surface? So do you remember any of the other stuff that we talked about?
I'll tell you one of the things you're talking about just with
with that group.
local predicament. One of the things that I love that they had us do, and they had us do this in a variety of the brainstorming sessions, was kind of the self and then team. And so they would give us kind of like all the Post-it notes, and we'd all have, I think, they're asking us to fill out, 10 bullet points of what you think, whatever the question was in regards to local predicament that would get us there. Yeah. And you start writing, you're like, I'm never going to get 10. And then before you know it, you're asking for more Post-it notes to keep filling it out, because your brain just starts going. You're thinking about this, and then this dot connects to that dot. And then we kind of go around the room, and then we start to take our personal Post-it notes and put them on a larger board and see where we're all connecting, what's the same, what are the common themes. And I thought that was incredibly helpful, because it's easy to just go, okay, yeah, it's probably these two things. But when you really get everyone thinking about it, you can really start to hear a little bit of what you were just speaking about, Derek, of the stories behind the things. And you start to hear some of those stories. And I think that's where I heard the train thing eventually, and like all these different pieces start coming out, and you really get to the root of, okay, what is actually leading to what we're culminating here of the whole. And I thought that process was super helpful, and I would recommend it in any group setting.
Yeah, and even just thinking through the people in the room is helpful. Like, I thought one of the coolest things was like maybe one of us more like long-termer and Erie people would have something on the list, and someone like an implant, I almost said. Whoops. Someone who moved.
We can call them that.
Someone who moved in, later in life or whatever, was like, what? Really?
Yeah.
Why that? Like, why? Like, never. And people that come here, it was just interesting in the room to have like long-termer, short-termers in the community, not even differing opinions, just surprised.
Well, and the ironic insecure thing came from that, because the new people to Erie were all like, we came here and we like, this is the greatest city. Like, you have benefits of a big city and benefits of a small city, and you have a Philharmonic and a children's museum and the lake and and like all these big city things, but you have a small city feel. And they're like, but it's only the people who are out of town that love it, and the people who are from here seem to hate it.
And we're all like,
or we're conditioned to be apologetic about it.
Exactly.
Like, well, remember, you're an hour and a half away from these three cities, and the summers are beautiful, even though there's snow. You start bringing that qualification to why you should love it, and that was a good reminder, because you're just like, wow, I'm really conditioned within the predicament that I'm, could think stuck in, or have an opportunity to help change.
And we now have a text stream with our Clarity House friends of anytime a slogan, we find a new slogan about Erie that comes up, we send it to them.
Oh my goodness.
So what was the one the other day, Aaron?
They're everywhere.
They are.
You don't think about it but it is everyone's positive, like everyone's trying to help redeem the narrative. Yeah, but
it's like you feel like it's uphill.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, here it is. Where there was a cup that I saw, and now people are sending it to me. People from Grace are sending it to me because I've preached about this ironic insecurity so much. So
that's a good one.
This is a local bakery that says Erie can have nice things,
with a lovely touch of a croissant
Aaron
embedded on top,
of course,
over the quote.
He's like, "How about that croissant?"
Yeah.
Again, great idea. Great intention.
Yeah.
But it represents this ironic insecurity.
It does.
So I think one of the things we're all saying, and I'd like to get specific, Aaron, with you on just like, how have you tried to be a positive force, I think, in this city, because we've had so many conversations over the years where it's like, I think my family's going to move. I think we're looking at a new house in the suburbs, and you're like, we just can't shake this calling that we have to the city. But I want to summarize this little segment and talk to church leaders and just say, I think we've all said it in different ways, but man, there's great value in grabbing some people from your staff or from your team or some volunteers in your church or whatever, and just go through the exercise of going, what is our local predicament? Yeah. And again, the kind of the definition we put on that is, what are the unique needs and opportunities where God has placed us?
And I literally think that was the exercise. It was like listing needs on one, listing opportunity. I think that was it.
Yeah,
that's how it started.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So Aaron, why don't you talk to us a little bit about kind of your journey in this, even before all this Clarity House stuff?
Well, for I don't know, about 2 decades now, going back, we were deciding where to kind of plant our family and whatnot. I was from the suburbs. My wife grew up in the city, and the more we talked about it, the more we kind of really felt like that we could potentially bring an example of light and hope to those around us where we're at in the city. Now, mind you, people in the suburbs can do that too.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
it's not, I'm not,
Yeah.
it's nothing like that. It was just kind of like, it was really what we were feeling. And when you're prayerfully walking through something like that and having conversations with, your wife or whatever, you go, okay, this is really something God's challenged us to. And what I learned is that, we wanted to raise our family in the city. We wanted to use that as an opportunity to connect with families, connect within the school, with more than just like PTO meetings or different things, but helping create a family movie night or different things that, to be honest, the city schools were a little under-resourced, so some of those things weren't happening. And so we thought if we could help provide that for some of the families and help provide things like cleanup days at the school or a variety of things like that, edging, I edge and help trim the bushes at the school near my house, just to kind of help, just bring a positive light and image and hope. But what I really learned is that it's not just about all those actions. It really was, I just needed to change the perspective of what I was probably already going to do and choose to live where I wanted to live, but do it with perspective and purpose. And I think that was the big thing. And so I think I don't know, for me, whatever your local predicament is, if you can just think about it through understanding it, but then also going, okay, if I'm called here, if I'm called to do this, like don't just be a parent that helps with your kids' sports teams, like do it with purpose and help change the perspective, because there is perspective everywhere. And we just talked about what Erie's is and whether it's the city or the region. And so how can I help change that and open up doors for conversation? So like I said, whether it's with family members or, of these students, our kids' friends or somewhere in the community, or even, I ran for school board to kind of help to see if that could be a thing, but politics is not for me.
Talk about your experience a little bit. You're going door to door in the city.
Whoa. That's funny.
But I will tell you the thing where I was surprised about the impact I made, that we were able to make, that I wasn't expecting, was the open doors of conversations with teachers.
Oh, that's cool.
And that was not something we were thinking.
Yeah.
It was, all the other things, all the kids' friends and these different things. But it really, teachers saw what we were doing and that we were different. And again, it was just because we were like, let's put purpose behind this and really help change the perspective of what we're doing. And again, most parents are already involved with some of that stuff anyway, but we just did it a little bit different.
Yeah.
One of the things I think, Aaron, that you brought to the staff too was this idea, I think because you're just personally passionate about it, but before this local predicament conversation, decade before probably, you started talking to staff people about like, do you have something that it wasn't a requirement, but like, do you have something like where you're like on a PTO, or you were very encouraging about letting people get involved in the community. Like if that means, you can't do like a Wednesday night something, you can't because you're on the PTO or whatever. So that was a cool thing I thought you brought.
Yeah, that's always a strong conviction I've had of. We are high empowerment culture at our church and in our organization. And so as we are asking people who are out there in community, in other sectors of society, or business, or education, whatever you have, we're asking them to help, move the mission that God is calling us to here as an organization. And so I thought, I think it's just as important for us being inside the organization to be out there pushing forward on, okay, what can I be involved in to help understand the community? Like if you're not involved in the community and somehow other than things your church does,
right,
you aren't going to know, you're going to be further removed from the community that you're trying to redeem.
Yeah, that's good.
And that was very important to me. And so I always wanted to make that available, whether it was some people would join a board, some people would do specific things, but we want to make space for that, for people to be able to do that.
One of the other things you've always been incredibly creative, Aaron, about leading our church into engagement in the community and bringing positive stuff. So, from your deep involvement with Serve Erie all the time, stuff outside of Serve Erie, really leading that organization forward. But I even think about, it just popped into my mind as you were talking. But back kind of in the throes of COVID, when we were doing some community efforts, we were helping with some coats and we were helping, excuse me, with some diapers. for single moms and different stuff like that. But you had this idea about helping some small businesses and restaurants who were really struggling because of the shutdowns and stuff like that during COVID. Can you just talk about that? Any stories kind of come to mind as you think about that effort that we did?
I'll tell you what, just my background is from restaurants. And so as I was, ordering we were all ordering the takeout meals at all these different places. Right. And, I would ask them how they're doing and be like, well, our servers are really struggling and the different situations. And I thought, what's a way that we could kind of help make a difference here? And I could not believe we got thank you cards. So we essentially, collected money and gave money out just in check form to, I think it was 25 different restaurants.
I was going to say it was right around 30.
Yeah. People were blown away that they never would have thought that a church would do that. We actually had people start attending Grace because of it, but more importantly, people in the community felt loved and seen. Yeah. And we got, I think we shared with staff a lot of the thank you cards that we got, and I still see some of the business owners, and they were just so blown away by it to understand that, sometimes a church, I don't know if you talk about this on here, but sometimes churches are known known for what they're known for, but here we go. Sometimes churches are known for what they're against.
Yeah, that's good.
And the reason I still am here today is because Grace has always been a church of like, hey, here we're actually for you, and here's what we're for, and we want to help bring you something to help soothe you where you're at. Yeah. And so if it's a financial need, we want to help with that. And I think it met a lot of people in a surprising way to go, you know what, I haven't completely closed myself off to the gospel and whatever that might mean for me.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because it shines a light on just, if you have people on your staff or volunteers who are in the community doing things out and active, that's the kind of innovation that'll come.
Exactly.
Nobody else would have thought of that idea.
Right.
Aaron thought of that idea.
Right.
And so it's just shine a light on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think all that you just talked about, I think is great practical examples, illustrations of how church leaders can kind of embed themselves in the local community, address the local predicament. I think about just a couple of other, I just wonder if we could just end generally here with any other ideas that we would give to church leaders about engaging their local predicaments. I mean, we talked already about maybe doing the process of like identifying those predicaments and getting some people in a room and go, what are the issues that our community has? And then the next step is to see how could we leverage the church toward those issues, both through disciple making, but also through other kind of efforts. And I think about a couple of the things that we've done in the past. I think about like prayer walks around a new area or whatever, just getting a small group of people that go kind of walk around a certain neighborhood or certain school. That's something that we've done as the church has gone into new communities and things like that. I think about even just like frequenting the same coffee shops and different things where you can kind of just hear people talking. Like you learn the issues of a community through things like that, where you're just kind of placing yourself in a spot where you can be part of the conversation. You talked already about getting people involved in local nonprofits and boards, serve on boards and that sort of thing. But anything else come to you guys' mind as we think about just kind of mobilizing the church in general toward addressing a local predicament?
One thing that we've done that I thought was pretty cool, and we just keep revisiting it, is just the idea of like learning the names of the neighbors that are around. Your neighbors. Yeah. It sounds so basic, but it really, for us too, was a challenge to get to know those names. So that'd be one I would think of off the bat.
That's a good one.
One of the things that I was thinking of when you were speaking, and I almost mentioned it earlier, is I would say every church has a unique situation. Every ministry has unique resources. And so there's probably resources that you have that I would say do what you can to make them available to your people. So let me walk that back a little bit. We had a servery trailer with tools in it that we made available to people. Because I was involved with the PTO at our school, I was able to set up a cleanup day, borrow the servery trailer, have the servery trailer on site. We were We had tons of volunteers there. We were cleaning it up. And there was a woman there, highly involved with the city schools, that said, what is this? Talk to me about Cerveri. What is this? And from there, we were able to connect the dots. I connected that person with Miriam at the time and Derek. And then before you know it, a few years later, we were doing large-scale projects that involved thousands of people at a local high school and some of the different schools. At the large one, the large local high school, we had both mayoral candidates in a room together, painting together.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right?
The Republican and the Democrat in the same room.
Working together. And you think of, we now have continued relationships with different initiatives and different community initiatives from that. I'm not saying that's all because I pulled the trailer up to that building.
It kind of is.
But it's when you make your resources available, hey, here's what we have. Go use it. Make a difference in the community. It opens up those doors that takes you to a place where we tell incredible stories of God's faithfulness later.
Yeah, that's good.
It's really great.
It's really good. That was a great conversation with Aaron.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
He has lived it.
That's the thing. The one thing I was thinking when he was talking, I was like, you're being like extremely humble. And he was. I mean, he is a special kind of a person in terms of like his passion in that area. But also I think he's also not in the same way. Like anyone can do it, which is cool.
Yeah. And it always cracks me up. You can be driving by, this is back in the day, but you could be driving by one of the city schools, these big schools.
Oh, yeah.
And Aaron's out there with his weed whacker. Etching.
What the heck?
He didn't even talk about, his parenting journey.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Adopting.
Oh, yeah. We didn't even get into it.
I mean, it just goes deep with them.
Very, very deep.
Yeah.
It's very cool. All right. So now we're going to talk about something that happened this week. And this week, we launched a new kind of Find Your Calling experience. You launched it.
Well, we did. You were there.
I was there.
Yeah.
But talk about what it is real quick.
Yeah. So I had the privilege of co-authoring a really cool experience. It's called Handcrafted. I worked on it with Dave and Shane from Clarity House. It's under their banner, and also a pastor from Florida named David Lovelace. And the four of us collaborated all through the summer on writing this material. And so I'm super proud of it. I was super, you even mentioned I was nervous. I was like super nervous.
I've not seen that in probably decades.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I was like, am I the only one that can see? I think I was definitely the only one that could tell. Like, maybe if Aaron had been there, he could have told.
But I think I think it was part just like I was invested in the process and in it going well. So anyway, it's a 6-week experience to help people find their divine calling, and I'm super excited about it. It's very much kind of the cornerstone of our vision going forward. And so, one of the things that we told Grace is that, this is going to be the multiplier effect from this vision. We'd like to see 30,000 people go through this experience from Cleveland to Buffalo. So in this whole region over the next 10 years. And we picked 30,000 because the population in those same 9 counties is 3 million. Yeah. And we just think if we could get a percent,
1%,
a percent of the population to understand why God put them on the planet,
amazing,
we can start changing the trajectory of an entire region.
Yeah.
So I thought it went well.
It went great.
Yeah, I thought it
really
went great.
did.
Yeah,
it really did.
I mean, you were sitting in the back. This is kind of part of our piloting thing too. Yeah. So maybe remind people a little bit about that and talk about your experience in the class. What did you think? We
learned one of our other cornerstone experiences called Launch. We piloted that with 80 or so people throughout September, and I think those of us that were involved in the piloting process valued it so much that we were like, we can't let Derek do the calling thing without somebody helping him somehow. Not that, you know what I mean? Not that you need help, but there's something about getting off the paper and getting in front of people and whatever. So,
and that different set of eyes, and I'll just talk about the inner conflict of it. We've been very busy. You just talked about piloting the launch thing that involved our whole staff. And so I'm going ready to do this. And like, there's the part of me going, I don't want to take any more of you guys' time to ask somebody to come to this other thing on Wednesday night, every Wednesday night for the next 6 weeks. Yeah. And so there's that tension of like, I don't want to, but I think you're right. We just found it so valuable that it's like, we'll ask some people to make a sacrifice just to get eyeballs that aren't in it that can be objective and can take notes on the notes and take notes on the experience and go, this worked, this didn't work, this was too long, this was too short, all the stuff.
Yeah.
So what was your experience of the class? Not
I
that you
loved
were
it. I liked the group. Like, it's a very diverse in age, vocation, gender.
Yeah.
It's like almost 50-50 male, female. I thought that was really cool. People connect, some people not connected to the church as much. And just, you could tell just from watching them kind of, I guess they kind of like described themselves at the beginning. It was going to be interesting and just different perspectives. That was cool. And I thought just the materials that you guys created were really great. But like watching, again, this is one of those like experience it things. I'm sitting there looking at looking at your stuff, looking at the book, and I'm like watching people, and I'm trying to watch people when they're writing. So it's like feels like a dumb little thing, but like someone's writing right now. There is no space in this book to write. Where are they writing that? So just little stuff like that. You need more space here. But it's those things that are like, take something from like 98% to 99, 100. And, I don't know. But I thought the class was great. I thought that it was like, it was definitely more lecture heavy than
The first week is very introductory, so it's kind of painting the picture of calling and all that means and is, and really the next coming classes are very workshoppy, very exercise heavy. People doing a lot of self-reflection, and the goal of the class is to come out of it with people naming their 2-word Ephesians 2:10 calling. And this is 2 words that they will take into every room they walk into, their job, their family, their hobby, whatever it is, and they'll know this is why God put me here. So it's exciting. And I'll tell you, I was at an event on Saturday night, so that would have been 4 days after the first class, and saw another local leader, and this was the first time. This guy's a real community leader. And he asked me what was going on at Grace, which is, a big question right now. Like, listen to the podcast. But he was asking specifically about Serveri, which has always been our community engagement, program that we talked about a little earlier. And he's been, observing that for a while. And it forced me for the first time to talk about this calling class and Serveri to somebody who's completely outside our orbit.
Oh yeah.
And so I said, here's how I described it. And Aaron was with me, and he said he wished he had a tape recorder. He's like, that's the best you've ever described it.
Oh man.
But I basically said, up until now, Serveri has been a mass movement of volunteers toward community projects. So paint brushes, repairing decks, doing that general work that needs to be done, that people love to do, that beautifies and makes the community a better place. I said, what we're trying to do is to move Serveri and some other things down to a very individualized approach where individuals in our community can find out why God has placed them on the planet, and then can wave the flag at us and say, now we need people to come alongside and help me fulfill this calling. And so that we can now go into every segment of society with individual kind of ambassadors who know why God has put them there, and to see communities kind of come to life as a result of people finding their God-given calling.
Good one.
Yeah. So
put it in the glossary.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it went well. And thanks for being there.
Yeah. Anytime.
Yeah.
Sort of. All right. Thanks for listening today. If you like this episode, you can tell us by leaving a rating or a review. 5 stars if you liked it. That'd be awesome. Seems awkward to ask for, but I'm gonna. Also, you don't want to miss what's next. We have some really cool guests coming on soon. We're scheduling those right now. Super excited for you guys to hear those. So help a friend by sharing this with them. And you can find detailed show notes, related resources at dereksanford.com. And that's where you can also submit those questions for the inbox questions or inbox content to us, and you can subscribe to Derek's newsletter there. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.